I'd like to introduce Eileen Jones. Eileen is the founder of Miles for Migraine and served as president from 2008 to 2016, a migraine patient herself for many years. She started the nonprofit organization after a 2000 visit to Congress, along with mostly headache disorder physician research specialists from across the U.S. to advocate for acute need for migraine research funding from the National Institutes of Health. The group formed into an Alliance for Headache Disorder Advocacy, where Eileen was a founding board member. They returned annually at their own expense to ask congressional representatives for headache research support. Miles for Migraine races exist to raise public support for the needs of migraine and headache disorders and direct funds to research. It is her fervent desire to expand the races to all major U.S. cities. After graduating from Stanford University, Eileen worked as a critical care unit nurse for many years and a disaster nurse specialist for the American Red Cross since 1998. It is my honor to welcome Eileen Jones.
Hello. Hello? Am I on?
Hi. Hi. Yes. Yes.
Eileen.
Good morning. Welcome to the Miles for Migraine San Francisco 3rd Annual Patient Education Day. I'm so glad that you can join us, whether you're tuning in locally or from across the country. On behalf of the Board of Directors, our executive Shirley Kessel and myself, welcome. I hope that today is beneficial for you. I have lived with chronic migraine for many, many years. What about you? Have you asked yourself, why me? Why did this happen to me? Why is the second most disabling condition in the world so difficult to treat? Isn't the government doing research in headache? Do people actually realize how devastating this disease can be and how it shatters so many lives? Well, I founded Miles for Migraine to address the need for research in this problem, research for a cure, to address the very critical need for headache specialists in this country. Currently, there's only around 300. And to change public awareness so that they don't think that migraine is just a headache. Now in our 13th year, Miles for Migraine has expanded. We now have races in 23 cities with 19 patient education days. And in addition, we have youth day camps, teen meetup groups, and community support groups, which are led by therapists or trained leaders. We specialize here at Miles for Migraine in treating you with face-to-face live events. While the pandemic has forced us to temporarily use virtual means to get to you and help you as we can, we hope that their value and intent is communicated as effectively as possible today. If you like what you see here and hear here, please tell your friends and family and neighbors so that they can learn about us too. We want to reach as many individuals as possible. We welcome your questions at the end with our panel. And until then, I'd like to now introduce our next speaker, Jenn Heater. Jenn is a patient advocate and the Director of Resources and Advocacy for My Chronic Brain, an online magazine for chronic migraine sufferers. She worked for more than 15 years in government affairs and public policy before migraine forced her to leave her career behind. But rallying for causes has long been a part of Jenn's life, and turning her illness into advocacy has been a gratifying transition. Jenn is a volunteer with Chronic Migraine Awareness and a U.S. pain ambassador, most recently having helped organize the California stop of the State House tour of the Invisible Project, Migraine Edition. And with that, welcome Jenn Heater.
Thank you, Eileen. Okay, so Katie, you're gonna put my slides up? Okay. So that might take just a second. And thank you all for being here. And there we go. Oh, except I need to make that smaller for me. So there we go. Okay, thank you. As Eileen said, my name is Jenn Heater, and I am so excited to have the opportunity to speak with you today. I want to thank Miles for Migraine for asking me to speak because I love the work that this organization does, and I am always excited to be involved and talk about advocacy and how much my work with the migraine community has helped me. We are living in strange times, and I am thankful now more than ever for this amazing community because I have met so many wonderful people and found support systems that I have needed, especially as we deal with the stress and confusion going on in the world right now. So now let me tell you a little bit about my story. Next slide. So you may have noticed that I write under the name Medical Oddity. It's the name of my blog, my Facebook, my Instagram, and Twitter handles. You get the point. I thought I'd give you a bit of a background on how that name came about and a very condensed medical background. Because like many of you out there, I could fill a few filing cabinets with all the notes from my doctors I've met with and the procedures I've had along the way. I'm sure many of you can relate. When I was a senior in college, I was diagnosed with a rare disease called Cushing's. It was around the same time that I noticed the increase in my episodic migraine. Cushing's disease, in my case, was caused by a pituitary tumor. The pituitary is a small but important gland, so important that they call it the master gland, and it sits right behind your eyes. So in 2000 at UCSF, I had my first brain surgery to remove my tumor and cure my Cushing's. Unfortunately for me, the darn tumor kept coming back and resulting in more brain surgeries. Another in 2009, and the final one in 2015. The surgery in 2009 was the tipping point for me, for my migraine journey. Because of nerve damage to my face, I became chronic. One day early on, not too long after one of my surgeries, while my immune system was still depressed, I had to go to the emergency room because I was living in a new city and I had spiked a fever and had a pounding earache. A young intern came in and took my history, getting very excited during the process because here I was, a textbook case of a disease she had only heard of. She attempted to look in my ear, and after 5 or 6 painful pokes, she said she could see nothing wrong. Looking at me, she said, "Well, you really are a medical oddity, aren't you?" I was sick, in pain, and felt hopeless. I knew something was wrong. Why couldn't she see it? Then I burst into tears. She freaked out, ran, got her attending, who took one look in my ear and schooled her intern because I had an obvious raging ear infection, and it wasn't too hard to see. But her words stuck with me, and I decided to make them mine because when I read the list of side effects on a new medicine, I know I'm going to get a bunch of them. When it comes to illness, my body seems to say, go big or go home. My doctors know I'm a difficult case, but as I like to remind them, I'm not sick, I'm medically complex. But I've learned that a good doctor-patient relationship is one that goes both ways and is just one of the many places we can advocate for ourselves and others living with migraine disease. Migraine runs in my family. Nearly every woman on my mother's side of the family experiences them, and my brother also gets them occasionally. And I first began experiencing them when I was in my late teens. For many years, I was able to control these episodic migraines through the use of triptans. But as I became chronic, the disease became too much for me to handle. In my case, pain hits on one side of my face first, a sharp stabbing burn accompanied by intense photophobia, nausea, and alternating flashes of hot and cold. It was hard for me to drive because I never knew if I was going to have an attack and be stranded, and some of my medications had side effects that made me uncomfortable and unwilling to get behind the wheel of a car after I had taken them. And many of these attacks lasted days, weeks, and even months, no matter what the doctor threw at them. I was living in Los Angeles, working at a full-time job I loved in an industry and position that I had worked to finally attain. Things probably looked okay from the outside, but the seams were coming apart more quickly than I was willing to admit. I had been on my own since I was 18, but since my health had started to deteriorate, my parents had started flying down and helping me with the basics: shopping, laundry, picking up prescriptions, and taking me back and forth to the growing plethora of doctor's appointments. Next slide, but I think it's a few back, but that's okay. You saw it. Back a couple. It was me laying in bed. Doesn't matter. You get the idea. I was laying in bed.
I don't know how to go back.
No worries, stay where you are.
Sorry.
I was laying in bed a lot. Chronic migraine was a huge part of the reason I was forced to leave my career behind. In 2014, I had to relocate because I was no longer able to live on my own. Not really what I had expected, to be 36 and living back with my parents again. My parents are wonderful people and I cherish the time we spend together, but the loss of independence is definitely a blow. 2 years later, I was let go from my job because I wasn't able to fulfill those duties anymore. I had put so much of myself into building a career in government relations, so losing that job was a huge loss to me because I felt like it defined so much of who I was. We often talk about grieving our old lives when we become chronically ill, and I grieved for this for a long time. Super advocate Katie Golden talks about the concept of the migraine thief, and that's the perfect way to describe it. In the span of 7 years, I had lost my independence, my career, and a big piece of my sense of self, stolen by the migraine thief. But here's the thing, advocacy saved me. I was in a place where I was in pain and had just lost a huge part of my identity. I spent many of my days in what I call my cave, my dark, quiet bedroom, pillow over my head, blackout curtains on the windows, scared to move, fearing the slightest twinge would cause the burning stake of pain in my eye to make my head explode. But the moments when the pain wasn't sky high, when it would begin to abate, I was restless. I knew I had to fill the holes where my old life had been. So I started searching for a way to fill my time. Because even though I felt pained and broken, for the most part, my mind was still working, migraine, brain, and brain fog notwithstanding. And I still had the skills I had worked so hard to hone during my career. I also desperately needed connection with others who knew what I felt and knew the shorthand migraine lingo that we all learn to speak so fluidly. My first outlet was writing. While I was employed, I was very open about my illness, but not online. So I started blogging and became very active about my illness on social media in a way I felt unable to previously. I joined a group called Chronic Illness Bloggers as a way to extend my reach and volunteer to help in their community. My first time sharing my story with a wide audience was a little intimidating, but ultimately very powerful. My 20-year high school reunion was coming up and I was in no shape to attend, so I decided to write about it and tell why I wasn't coming. I had the story published on The Mighty, a website for people with chronic illness and disability. From there, I shared it on Facebook and in our online reunion group, and the response I got was very empowering. So many people reached out to tell me about the things that they were struggling with or the people they knew that had gone through something similar. Next slide. Telling your story is a powerful thing. We have all gone through so many different battles with migraine, from managing the pain and the myriad of symptoms that go along with it, to losing jobs and relationships, to navigating prior authorizations, battling with insurance companies, and trying multiple medications and treatments to control this disease. For me, speaking about what had happened allowed me to slowly begin to move forward. There are many organizations that encourage you to tell your story. I have some on this page, including the American Migraine Foundation, the National Headache Foundation, US Pain, which has the Migraine Edition. There's a new one that just came out, Chronic Migraine Awareness, Healthy Women, Migraine Again, and migraine.com. When I started my advocacy journey, I also began connecting online with other people that spoke about having migraine, and in my case, chronic migraine in particular. There were multiple groups dedicated to migraine support on Facebook, and I joined up and looked for ways to get involved. I volunteered to be a part of the US Pain Foundation as an advocate and slowly started to make connections in the community. Don't get discouraged if it takes you a while to find the right group. Sometimes you have to try a few to find the one that clicks. Next slide. In mid-2018, a friend of mine approached me with an idea. Amanda and I had met a few years prior on Twitter, but had bonded very quickly over migraine and chronic illness. She was frustrated by the lack of resources in one place for people with chronic migraine. She wanted to create an online magazine that would provide scientific information, patient stories, advocacy, and more. I immediately responded, I'm in. And soon after, my chronic brain was born and I was in charge of resources and advocacy. Next slide. Being a part of my chronic brain was a major turning point for me. I was part of a team, writing pieces about advocacy and interviewing organizations that worked in the migraine space. Even better, my team was made of almost exclusively of people with migraine, so there was understanding and a flexibility when it came to scheduling meetings and deadlines. It was no easy task to start a self-funded magazine from nothing, but doing something for a cause you love has always been so motivating for me, and I had been sorely missing in my life. Don't get me wrong, there were days when the memories in my Facebook feed popped up and reminded me of how my old life used to be, and I still grieved it. But now I had something to actively work on and advocate with, and I felt so much more at peace with my life, even if it was still filled with pain. Chronic Brain is now in its second year, and working on this amazing project has opened up an even greater platform for me to advocate in. Last year, I was in charge of bringing US Pain's invisible project, Migraine Edition, to the state capitol in Sacramento. I am also involved in Chronic Migraine Awareness and ran their table last year at Miles for Migraine's race in San Francisco. They have an advocacy group called ARMS. It stands for Advocates Removing Migraine Stigma. I was also recently named the director and look forward to continuing to work on projects with them, such as their Rally Against Chronic Migraine program and assisting others in amplifying their voices in the Migraine and Headache Awareness Month, Faces of Migraine Action. Next slide. When you say advocacy to people, their minds immediately go to the political, stomping around the halls of Congress and rallying behind legislation. Yes, these are vitally important parts, but they are only a small piece of the advocacy puzzle. At My Chronic Brain, we work with artists that express themselves through photography, painting, and various other mediums to show the world what migraine looks like. That's advocacy. One of our editors suffers from vestibular migraine and has found extreme benefit to controlling her migraine advocacy through cooking, and she puts out recipes and even a cookbook to the community. That's tasty advocacy. Wearing a shirt, a pin, or something out in the community and starting conversations about migraine with others about the disease is advocacy too. I can't tell you how many times I have been wearing this button right here, and someone comments, "Oh, I have migraine," or "My sister, my aunt, my friend has migraine." So I pull out a card and tell them, we have a great community. There are tons of resources, and tell them just to reach out. Advocacy can be the simple act of making that connection. Next slide. And making those connections is important. So in-person events are a fantastic way to do that. I know this slide is a little bit unattainable at the moment, but these are great events, and many of them have pivoted to Zoom and have virtual components for the time being. Miles for Migraine hosts many of these education days and races around the country, and in addition, they have community groups that meet at various times throughout the week, and when they have in-person, they meet across the country. US Pain holds lots of different training events, such as support group moderator training. And then there is Retreat Migraine, which will be going into its second year. And don't discount the impact of social media. I know that even under normal circumstances, there are many days it's hard for me to get out and about, but there are always messages that need to be spread from other members of the migraine community. Whether it's making those personal connections, tweeting your member of Congress about the importance of increased funding for headache specialists, or making a post about an upcoming Miles for Migraine event. Getting started can seem daunting, but you've already taken the first step. You're part of a Miles for Migraine event. And the events are a great way to connect with others in the community and to find out about other organizations and the programs they offered. Next slide. And right now, at this crazy time, next slide, in our world, so many migraine organizations have patient-centered COVID resources, including support groups, ways to deal with treatments getting canceled, insurance issues, and more. CHAMP, the Coalition for Headache and Migraine Patients, has a great collection of these on their website. This is just a snippet, but you can find them all at headachemigraine.org. Next slide. Some things I want to stress before I wrap up. Number one, advocacy is for everybody. You are unique. Your story is unique. How you view the world is different from anybody else, and you can make an impact in a myriad of different ways. Two, there is room in this community for everybody. I found this to be an incredibly welcoming community, and there are many different organizations. It may take a while to find the right one for you, but don't let not clicking with one group stop you from continuing your search for the right one. No matter what your talent is, there's likely a place for you. There is a place for you. One thing to remember is a lot of these groups are run by volunteers with migraine, so don't be alarmed if your request isn't answered immediately. It never hurts to follow up. 3, don't forget to advocate for yourself. This is a big one. I am good at advocating for migraine and chronic migraine, but it is so much harder for me to advocate for myself, but I'm getting better. Don't forget to speak up at the doctor and take time for self-care when you need it. And 4, we all have something to contribute to advocacy. Your delivery system may just be different from mine. Whether you express yourself through writing, painting, speaking, graphic design, lobbying elected officials, designing migraine t-shirts, communicating on social media, or wearing that purple migraine flare, your advocacy is important. Next slide. What this all boils down to is that yes, migraine sucks, but there are things you can do to make an impact, connect with others, and positively affect your life. You've already taken the first step, and there's a community of people out here cheering you on and ready to help you continue to amplify your voice. Migraine is tough, but together we are tougher. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. That was fabulous. What a great presentation. And she is a fabulous advocate. Hopefully if you learned one thing, you learned so much from her today. So again, we will take questions later and answer later. So thank you again, Jen. We appreciate you so much. We appreciate everything you do for Miles for Migraine and that you do for all the other nonprofits and everyone that you help. So don't forget to sign off and click on to the next speaker, and we will see you there. Thanks so much.